afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. Norwich City kicking off in just under 24 hours at the CBS Arena against Coventry. And with that, delighted to be joined by my colleague Samuel Seaman for this preview show. Of course, we want your comments, questions, whether they be about the game or the January transfer window, score predictions. Get them down in the comment section below and we'll come around to those towards the end of the show. Sam, to start off, how's your week been? But I want to kind of get your reflections almost a week on now since that top performance at Preston, the 4-0 win. I mean, the only negative that I can think of is that it wasn't more than 4-0 because it just felt like that was a Norwich City performance that we haven't seen for quite a long time.
Yeah, no, it was good. I was hit with tonsillitis the day after, so it was sort of it was like the best possible scenario, and then immediately downhill. But on the way back up now, and I think looking back, it felt like an enormous positive because it's been so long since we had that moment. And I think Norwich fans have been deprived of a reminder of why they do this the whole time. I think there's probably been a few times this season when people have, paid maybe even hundreds of pounds, travelled for, 7, 8, 9 hours in a day to go and watch an away game and probably been left thinking, why do we do this? And yet I think on Saturday they had finally a reminder of what it's all about and the gamble that you take when you buy those tickets, when you get on that coach. Or in the car or on the train to drive to get to that away game. That's what it's all about in the end. And as much as I'd like to talk about tactics and performances and technical things, I think what was most heartwarming for me to see and most positive for me to see was that connection with the fans and that happiness that they clearly had. I mean, there were times when they got 3 points and we look back on sort of that 1-0 win at Swansea or at Blackpool and 2-1 win at Rotherham. And you look at that and it felt like, yes, that was positive, but there was nowhere near this sort of comprehensive, positive happiness that we felt at Deepdale on Saturday. And I think David Wagner's job now is to just cement that and achieve more of that, because I don't think anybody could have looked at that and questioned what this football club was about, and that's something we haven't been able to say for a long time. So it was a real step in the right direction and a massive positive step. So I'm really looking forward to see if they can capitalise on it. Hopefully we're not looking back in a couple of months and saying, didn't we all look stupid when we were sort of forecasting a real positive future based on that 4-0 win against Preston. But no, it was a step in the right direction. Still a lot of work to do, but it certainly showed what Norwich City can achieve under David Wagner if they continue to get it right.
Yeah, Nicky in with YouTube. How are we both? I mean, it's really nice to be doing one of these preview shows, feeling quite positive for once. This season's been tough at points doing these shows, and it just felt like you kind of waiting for the inevitable defeat to happen the following day, but feeling really good about this one. Sam, want to just hone a little bit of conversation in on a certain striker, Teemu Pukki, 88 Norwich City goals now and counting. It feels like, there's still potential that he could reach that 100 mark before the end of the season. There was a nice clip about David Wagner yesterday in his press conference, sort of speaking about how, he sort of, got on with Teemu Pukki in the early weeks of their relationship, but also a little bit about a contract situation, which I'm just going to play the clip and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Just last one for me, obviously with him, I think his contract expires at the end of this season. I mean, I know you've only been in the door a couple of weeks, it might be quite difficult for you to answer, but in terms of where that situation is, I mean, what's kind of your understanding of it? And I guess in the second part, would you like to sort of extend his contract if that became a possibility?
Yeah, obviously you like to have quality players in your squad and in your team. I think this is something I have to discuss with Stuart. Everything what I've heard is that Teemu has an offer, I think, since a few months or since last summer on the table. I think he said that he maybe likes to make his thoughts till the summer, what he likes to do or likes to decide, and this is his right. So he has a contract till the summer, which I'm very pleased with. Hopefully we can longer work together and maybe not. This is time of the part of the business. I think 4 months is a long time in football, and then we know more. But first and foremost, I'm very happy to have him in our team.
Good stuff. Thank you, David. Thank you.
Yeah, so that was David Wagner yesterday speaking about Teemu Pukki and obviously the contract situation. It was really nice to see him sort of play with a smile on his face again on last Saturday at Preston. It felt like kind of the Teemu Pukki of old that we've all been missing. There's sort of been debates this season whether Teemu Pukki is the same player. I mean, obviously he's quite a few years older now compared to even the last time in the Championship, but that felt like Teemu Pukki that we all know and love in the Championship and sort of the ability he has to score goals in this league. So, Sam, for starters, do you think he'll thrive underneath David Wagner and the system that he's playing? But two, how important is it that we maybe get to that summer point where if Norwich are, say, back in the Premier League, will Teemu Pukki be signing a new contract, or is that maybe the factor that's maybe still in his head, do you think?
Well, the evidence, to answer your question about whether he'll thrive, certainly to start off with, looks positive. Probably worth remembering that he scored in Dean Smith's first game in charge. But I think he probably actually would have looked at things on Saturday, and if he saw a lot of the analysis and the reaction, he might have been feeling a little bit left out. There was a lot of praise for Kenny McLean and Kieran Dowell, and he scored a brace, including one of his best Norwich City goals, and hasn't been spoken about that much, I don't think. But the way that the system is set up is perfect for him, really. I think perhaps if he had slightly more athleticism, he might suit the pressing side of it a little bit more. But on the attacking side, and once the players are there around him to create the chances for him, it certainly looks like he's going to be fed a lot more than he was when Dean Smith was in charge, mainly because the focus and the onus is on attacking so much more. I think the fact that the fullbacks are going to be getting up and to the bylines probably helps him a lot more as well, rather than crossing from sort of deep positions. And that, if you're crossing from deeper, you tend to cross the ball higher, and you're looking for headers more often than if you get into the byline and cutting the ball back, which is how Teemu Pukki scored so many of his goals sort of in his early seasons at Norwich. And that Max Aarons-Pukki combination was one that we actually saw on Saturday, and one that thrived in that sort of system under Daniel Farke. So I think all the signs point to Teemu Pukki being a key player under Wagner. But as you said, it all circles around that contract situation and whether he's going to sign a new one in the summer. And I do genuinely think it's as simple as, if they're in the Premier League, he's probably most likely to sign a new contract. And if they're in the Championship, I very much see him departing. I suppose the fact that he's had an offer on the table for so long suggests he maybe is keen to really assess his situation in depth once he gets there. So you do consider whether maybe he gets to the summer and looks at what sorts of clubs are interested in him, because it's well and good saying if they're in the Championship, he won't stay. But if they're in the Championship and the only alternative he has are Blackburn and Blackpool, I'll probably see him staying at Carrow Road personally. But I do think they will get some competition, probably not from the top leagues, but maybe, we've seen Besiktas and those sorts of clubs linked with him before. And so I think it does mainly hinge on those two factors, the competition that Norwich have for his signature and the league that they're in. But if they're in the Premier League, I don't see many 33-year-olds that have had the career that he has turning down the opportunity to probably start every week in the Premier League, especially in a system that it looks like he's going to thrive in. So, yeah, I'd be very surprised if they're in the Premier League next season and he doesn't at least consider staying at Carrow Road. But if they're in the Championship, it certainly will be a fight to keep his signature.
Yeah, before we turn the attention to the opposition, just want to talk about another man who starred in that performance at Preston, a certain Kieran Dowell. It felt like maybe the tactics that Wagner had implemented suited Kieran Dowell sort of down to a T. I mean, you had sort of Sauer in the single pivot, didn't you? McLean kind of dropping in towards the sort of central defensive position at different points, and it allowed the fullbacks to bomb on, and that obviously gave Dowell more opportunity in sort of half spaces to create the chances for Teemu Pukki, which he's obviously been missing in terms of service so far this season. So, Sam, I want to get your sort of take on Kieran Dowell. Is this maybe a fresh start for him now at Norwich City under David Wagner? Is this going to suit him down to a T? And what do you want to see from him between now and the end of the season?
I want to see the same things that David Wagner wants to see, really. He spoke after that match about how it's all well and good, the attacking side, and everyone can see the capabilities that he has on that side of things. But he was more enthused by a big tackle that Dowell made right before he before he was substituted than he was by the sort of attacking play that we've become used to from Dowell. I think he's a a player who's definitely shown the signs of what he can produce before, and it feels like a bit of a deja vu scenario. Every time he puts in one of these sorts of performances, we have this discussion, is now the time for Kieran Dowell to kick on? It never has been on a consistent basis, at least. So, I don't want to put too much pressure on him. There's been a few players since Emi Buendia left that we've sort of christened the new creative force. I think I wrote a piece actually about Aaron Ramsey at one point earlier in the season, saying that he could be the Buendia replacement. So I think the yearn and the desire for a player in that role means that the pressure on Kieran Dowell after that performance is probably going to be amped up a little bit. And against a Coventry side that Norwich probably should be dominating, the opportunity is definitely there for him to go and build on this performance. So I don't think he has too many excuses in the way, to be honest. As Wagner said, it's on him really to have that hunger and that desire to go and win tackles and improve on that side of his game. And if that's something he can do, he's got all the other attributes to be able to thrive, really. I think Dean Smith sort of criticised his pace a little bit, and that might not be something that naturally he's built with. But if you've got the right intelligence and the right hunger, then pressing can still be something you're well involved in. So all the elements are there, much like sort of Todd Cantwell, who's now looks like he's probably going to depart today, or in the coming days. It's about whether those elements ever come together, and I don't think Norwich can afford to have another nearly story or a sad story of a player who's got all the ability and just can't do it in the end. So I really, really hope for Kieran Dowell and his own career that he can bring those together. But more importantly for Norwich City, I think they desperately need a player in that mould. Otherwise, they're going to be turning to Denel Sinani and Ono Hernandez to create their chances for the rest of the season, and that may be difficult. So, yeah, I think he's definitely capable of doing it. But I'm not going to say that he is going to do it until we start to see the evidence, because there's probably been 3 or 4 occasions before when this has been the scenario and he hasn't quite managed to pull it off.
Yeah, Coventry City, obviously the opponents. We've got a question here from Glenn Watkin asking which Coventry players are we worried about causing Norwich problems? I believe Callum O'Hare is injured for quite an extensive period of time. He's a player I'm a massive fan of. He's kind of the player that I'd love to have seen Norwich maybe go out and purchase. He's a real sort of creative flair player in terms of the sort of attacking midfield position. And I remember watching him at his Villa days, sort of when he was a young player there, and I think I watched him against Norwich under-21s, and I really saw the talent then. So he's probably the one that I'd have thought of. But I mean, the obvious one for me is Gyökeres up front, 12 goals so far this season. I actually spoke to a Coventry fan on Terrace Talk this week, and he kind of said that he's obviously a striker that's still developing and still growing. He's still a very young player. He maybe takes 6, 7, 8 chances before he scores, but definitely a player that's going to probably reach the Premier League at some point in the near future. So I think he'd be my pick. So Sam, which Coventry player are you worried about? And also, what have you made of Coventry across the board so far this season?
I really like Gustavo Hamer. That's my sort of claim to fame, is that 3 years ago when I was trying to get into uni, we had to sort of produce work that showed how our writing was, and I did like a scouting thing suggesting 5 players that Norwich could sign or whatever, and Gustavo Hamer was in there when he was playing right back in the Dutch second division. So when I've seen him doing well in the Championship, I've told everyone about this story. So no surprise it's ended up on the Pink and channels in the end. But he's taken that form that I saw sort of 3-4 years ago and that data, and now as a central midfielder really looks at a creative force and a physical force for Coventry as well. He fills both of those roles very well, and Norwich fans probably don't have the best ideas of him as a player, because I think he actually gave the ball away for one of those goals when Norwich beat them 3-0 at Carrow Road. But he's certainly a player that I'd watch out for. Certainly stands out for me in that Coventry group, which actually is full of some quite good technical players. Tyler Walker is another player I like, and one who looked quite dangerous at Carrow Road, I thought. But they're maybe not quite so refined. They're the sorts of players that remind me of Norwich's sort of early Daniel Farke era, when they had to pick out those players that were maybe risks and that you could see the sort of rough diamond in them and the materials that could achieve success in the future, but they weren't quite honed and they weren't quite at reaching their potential just yet. I think Robbins is a coach that probably will be able to get that out of them. But they're a team that I certainly respect, and I think they always will give you a tough time, especially at home. The exception probably being that one game against Norwich. I think from speaking to Coventry fans ahead of this game, they almost highlighted that as one of their worst performances this season, and a really bad example of what they are as a team. So any Norwich fan that was at Carrow Road probably shouldn't take that for granted and take that as the sort of team they expect to see at the CBS Arena tomorrow, because they are a really well organised team. And I don't want to just throw those Championship cliches, because there's so many times when we talk about teams just being organised and knowing what they're doing and structured and hard-working. And those are actually the majority of the run-of-the-mill teams in the Championship do possess those qualities over any other. But I think Coventry do actually have some quite exciting players that can thrive maybe on the counter and when they get into the right scenarios. So there's certainly some danger for Norwich to contend with. But I just think over the piece, there's probably more inconsistency in Coventry's squad, and Norwich probably do have that slightly more honed talent throughout the team. So I'd still make Norwich big favourites, but it's certainly not one they can afford to fall asleep for.
Yeah, it'll be live for another 10 or 15 minutes or so. So any last questions, get them down in the comment section below. We'll come around to those in just a moment. But a man who looks like he's on his way out of Norwich City, Sam, looks like he's almost there. Todd Cantwell, 129 games for the club, 14 goals, 12 assists. Yeah, I suppose just want to get your take on that one. You know, he's a player that I felt in pre-season maybe looked like a man sort of possessed. He really wanted to come back and make an impact and, you know, sort of create that creative spark that maybe Norwich have missed for a certain period of time since Emi Buendia's departure. So it could have maybe made him the main man so far for this season, but it hasn't really panned out that way. A move to Rangers looks like it's almost confirmed now. So just want to get your take on that news. Are you maybe disappointed that this is the way it's ended, or maybe are you looking at it and thinking what could have been?
Yeah, it's quite a strong feeling of what could have been. I think most Norwich fans are probably looking at it as quite a sad story. I don't think there are too many that would argue that he could stay and contribute in future. I think everybody recognises this is the right move for all parties, but it is sad, and it probably shows that hard work plus talent doesn't always equal good results, because as you said, in pre-season, he came back, and I think that attitude was such that he maybe wasn't producing too much in pre-season. He wasn't like, you know, carving out brilliant assists or beating players easily. It was just that you could see he had that hunger back and that he was keen to impress. And I think Norwich fans have seen such talent from him before and such natural ability that we all assumed once we saw that hard work, that the results would follow and that his technical ability would shine through. But it just didn't. I think other than that Cardiff game where he stood out, and I think any creative player would have stood out. I think I probably could have attempted a couple of through balls and people would have been saying that I was the best creative player on the pitch during that game. But since then, there's just not really been the signs of a player. There's a lot of Jack Grealish at Manchester City for me about him this season, if you know what I mean. A lot of getting on the ball, looking quite dangerous, and then turning backwards and passing the ball back. Not too much penetration, not too much risk-taking in his football this season. And I feel that's where maybe the confidence has played a part and has separated the player he is now to the player he was in the first half of that 2019-20 season, when, you know, Arsenal and Liverpool were linked and Manchester City and sort of the whole of English football was put on notice regarding Todd Cantwell. But I hope this move to Rangers does give him a fresh start. I don't think there are too many Norwich fans that will be, you know, begrudging him the move or not wishing him success, because I know he's frustrated them at times, but he is a Norfolk boy at the end of the day, and his love for football, I think, shines through, and that's something that any football supporter can relate to. So I hope he goes and has a very successful career from here. It feels like it's been crying out for a move for a couple of years, to be honest. And once that sort of separation happened at the start of the 2021-22 season, it felt like it would be very difficult to come back. And as much as we saw the flickers of it this summer, or last summer, sorry, it didn't ever really feel that close to materialising in terms of him coming back to being the players that Norwich fans knew and loved. So a move that I'm sure he'll be happy to finally get over the line, but there'll be frustration for him that he's not going to Arsenal or Manchester City or Liverpool. He's going to Rangers, with all due respect, obviously a massive club, but he'll want to be at the top end of the Premier League. And there'll probably be frustration for Norwich that not only has he not achieved on the pitch in a yellow and green shirt, but that he probably felt like a player within the Norwich model that could have been that Ben Godfrey, Emi Buendia, Jamal Lewis, James Maddison type. He could have been in that 25-30 million bracket had things gone well for him. But in the end, it's probably going to be quite a nominal fee. and a sort of backdoor exit for a player who I think at times looked like he could have become a Norwich City legend, and that is a real sad sign.
Yeah, just turn the attention back to Saturday. What do you expect from the lineup tomorrow, Sam? Do you think it's going to be unchanged? Wagner obviously spoke yesterday at the press conference and just said that it's Ben Gibson who's still missing for this one. He's trained during the week but has missed some sessions, and he's obviously going to be a man for the Burnley home game. But aside from that, going to be the same squad that was available for the game at Preston. So same team, same formation, Sam, or do you think Wagner might change it up?
Yeah, I hate to take the tension out of my tactics board video, which will be coming out later on the thinking channels, obviously. But yeah, I do think it's going to be unchanged. When you win 4-0, what else are you going to do? He doesn't have any selection issues. As you said, Ben Gibson isn't back in contention. And I thought, aside from the centre-backs, who I thought were just fine, quite, I don't want to use the word average, but I don't think they particularly stood out. I thought everybody else in the team was impressive and would be incredibly hard done by to be dropped. That said, I thought Angus Gunn was a dead cert to start on Saturday, and Tim Krul came in instead. So who knows what David Wagner might have up his sleeve, but especially without the Tuesday, Saturday need to rest players, I don't see any reason why David Wagner, unless there's some sort of late injury or illness to a player that means they can't be involved, I don't see why he would feel motivated to change it. And I'm very much expecting to see the same lineup, and hopefully it produces the same results.
Yeah, before I get your thoughts on the game and your score prediction, Sam, a late comment here from East End Guy. My question is, where is Atanasio? What is he doing? And when will he buy out Delia Smith and Wyn Jones and inject the capital needed into this club? So, yeah, Sam, that's a different one, obviously off topic from the game. But what's your take on that situation for anyone that maybe hasn't, sort of seen the inside track on the Atanasio stuff?
Yeah, I think all the voices from the people higher up in the club, mainly the Webbers and the people that have spoken, admittedly limitedly recently, but when they have spoken and they have been asked about the Atanasios and how involved they are, they've said that they have been involved, and they've said that their benefits have been felt within the club. So if we're to take them at their word, they're sort of in the meetings, helping with strategic decisions and helping with advice. I think they're probably still quite behind on their understanding of football. I understand they watch every game, so I'm sure they're catching up very quickly, but they probably don't know as much as the majority of fans yet, let alone the people that are making the decisions. So I think there's probably still some time before they're having a sort of profound impact on the club, and certainly financially it's set up to be a slow burner. But they have expressed their desire to be involved further, and I don't think it's something any of us would be surprised to see if they did eventually purchase at least some of those shares from Smith and Wyn Jones. But I think for now it's something to stand down on in the short term. I saw is it Mike, the one that was on Twitter, sort of asking which Norwich accounts he should follow, and even before that he was being very active with photos and things on Twitter. So I'd say he's a decent follow if you want to see how their journey supporting Norwich City is coming along. And he's clearly quite interested and quite keen to be involved. So there is that excitement on their end, and there is that keenness to be involved, which I think is exciting for all of us to see. But as these things always are in football, when you're talking about ownership changing hands and huge amounts of money and share capital and things, it's usually something more for the midterm and long term. So it's probably not one to be pinning your hopes on sort of week to week and just to keep an eye on, because I think it could have a profound impact on the club in future. But for now, it just looks like it's one that's sort of slowly building up.
There we go. Hopefully that's answered your question. We're now going to just delve back into the game, Sam. Want to get your score prediction. There's a few already come through. 3-1 Norwich there, and Graham also feeling very positive. 3-0 Norwich, and that's quite nice to be seeing those kinds of scorelines flooding through. So, Sam, are these people being overly optimistic, or is that that mood that's from that Preston game going to carry on, and Norwich going to get a good win?
Maybe slightly optimistic. I'm still going to go for a Norwich win, but yesterday me and you were on a sort of Coventry fan podcast, and I said 2-1, and I'm still feeling like that's probably quite a realistic scoreline. You go into away to a very well organised team, to get those cliches out again, a very well organised, very hard-working, very sort of passionate fan base as well. They've got new ownership and they've got that positive atmosphere behind them as well. So I don't think it's going to be particularly easy. You probably have to consider the fact that Preston were pretty awful the other day as well, to be honest. So yeah, I'll say 2-1, but I think I'm still well inside the optimistic camp if I'm going for a Norwich City win, which I assume you are as well, Adam.
Yeah, I think I said 2-0 on that show, feeling very positive, and I think another clean sheet would do the defenders of the world of good. Obviously, they've had issues in terms of just conceding sort of late and silly goals over the course of the season so far, but that felt like a very decent defensive performance at Preston. Obviously, Tim Krul did save them on a couple of occasions to sort of maintain the clean sheet, but on the whole, it was a very strong display, and I expect Norwich to do exactly the same against a Coventry side that's, kind of struggled a little bit more recently in terms of their form again, although, well, from what Paddy was saying, obviously a Coventry fan, for anybody who's unaware, he was saying that at Burnley, one of his friends was there last weekend, and Coventry were very good that day. So I'm expecting a much more difficult test than what we got at Preston, but I'm more, very confident at the moment off the back of that performance that Norwich can roll up to the CBS Arena and put on a good performance. So with that, I think we'll round off the show. Thanks for joining us this lunchtime. Of course, lots of great content across our channels at the moment. You've got David Wagner's press conference that moved from a Friday AM slot to a Thursday PM slot. So that's available now to go and watch for all of the sort of team news. And there's lots of great lines about Todd Cantwell, Timu Pukki, and other sort of, facets around this game. So that's well worth a watch. My Terrace Talk is up if you want to get some more insight on the opponents for tomorrow. Coventry, that's again, I spoke to Miles from I think Sky Blues Fans TV. Lots of great insight there on the opposition. Sam's going to soon be recording his tactics board video, so if you're a man or anybody who's interested in tactics, then Sam's your man. So that's going to be well worth a watch later on this afternoon. And of course, we've got lots of great articles as well across our channels. Chris Sutton's latest column is available on the Pink and Plus, as is Ewan Roberts. So if you're not a Pink and Plus subscriber, free trial, $1.99 a month thereafter. That's well worth checking out. Just before we round off the show, just want to make a little bit of a plug for the clap for Amber on the 8th minute tomorrow at the CBS Arena, who tragically passed away this week. A young Norwich super fan who was, I think she won fan of the season last year. So that will be a really nice moment. So if you're a Norwich City fan going to the game tomorrow, or a Coventry City fan at the game tomorrow, then note that one and join in with the minutes of applause on the 8th minute. So with that, thanks for joining us. Enjoy your Friday, enjoy your weekend. If you're making the trip up to the CBS, the nearly 2,700 Norwich fans at the moment, making that trip, be loud. I think the drum's going tomorrow as well, so I'd imagine it'll be a really good atmosphere, and hopefully you'll be rewarded for your efforts for the journey. So we're gonna crack on, enjoy the rest of your Friday, as I said, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you tomorrow at